What is the shortest verse in the Book of Mormon? While this sounds like a simple trivia question, the interesting answer may reveal something to us about the cost of following God. Let's dive in and find out what we can learn from the shortest verse in the Book of Mormon.
I promise that as you ponder what you study, the windows of heaven will open, and you will receive answers to your own questions.
The simple answer is 1 Nephi chapter 2, verse 15, which says, "And my father dwelt in a tent." Now that can seem like a pretty boring, plain verse, especially when we don't look at what's going on in context. So let's take a look at it. Nephi actually references that same statement 3 other times in the Book of Mormon, in that first book of Nephi. These references are 1 Nephi 9:1, 1 Nephi 10:16, and 1 Nephi 16:6. When we see something repeated in the scriptures, it tells us actually that something is important. Let's try to figure out what was so important about that statement to Nephi. It starts with looking at the very first verse in the Book of Mormon. This is 1 Nephi chapter 1, verse 1. Let's look carefully at what Nephi says. He says, "I, Nephi, having been born of goodly parents, therefore I was taught somewhat in all the learning of my fathers." So we can look at that and break down 2 components of that first little phrase. I, Nephi, having been born of goodly parents. Well, what does that mean? A lot of times we interpret that to mean, I had good parents, they were nice, they did me well. However, the next line actually gives us more information about what the line goodly parents means, because he uses the word therefore. Therefore I was taught somewhat in all the learning of my father. What we can learn from that is that Nephi's family was well off, in that they could afford to pay for learning. Nephi was well educated because his family came from a wealthy background. Are there other scriptures that can help us confirm that they were well off? Yes. In 1 Nephi chapter 2, verse 4, we have an experience where Lehi, the father of Nephi, has been commanded of the Lord to flee Jerusalem. They are to leave, and all of their stuff. Let's see what Nephi writes. "And it came to pass that he," meaning Lehi, "departed into the wilderness. And he left his house, and the land of his inheritance, and his gold, and his silver, and his precious things, and took nothing with him, save it were his family, and his provisions, and his tents, and departed into the wilderness." He made very careful mention of all the things that he left, including their riches, their home. Well, that still doesn't tell us that they were really well off, but we can look at other scriptures that tell us more. In verse 11, we can see what Nephi's brothers' responses, Laman and Lemuel, were to being asked to leave all their stuff. This is what Nephi reports. "For behold, they did murmur in many things against their father, because he was a visionary man, and he led them out of the land of Jerusalem, to leave the land of their inheritance, and their gold, and their silver, and their precious things, to perish in the wilderness. And this they said he had done because of the foolish imaginations of his heart." Okay, they're complaining specifically about those things. But how do we know still that it was a lot? Well, we have in the story, after they've departed into the wilderness, Lehi receives a commandment that his sons should go back to Jerusalem to get the brass plates, which contains the books of Moses and other prophets and the law, to go get it from a man named Laban. Laban is a big deal. He has these plates. And so they go to try to get them. In their first attempt of just asking him, he says, "No, get out of here. I'm not going to give you these plates. They're very valuable." Brothers reconvene and they try to figure out, okay, what do we do to try to get these plates? Our dad told us to do it. We got to do it. Nephi comes up with the idea, hey, let's go back to our house. We left all of our stuff there. We got tons of stuff. Let's go get our gold and our silver and our precious things and bring it back, and we'll try to buy the brass plates. So they do that. They go get all, they got it all, and they're bringing it to Laban, and Laban sees their belongings. Let's look at his reaction. In chapter 3, verse 25, we read, "And it came to pass that when Laban saw our property, that it was exceedingly great, he did lust after it, insomuch that he thrust us out and sent his servants to slay us, that he might obtain our property." So clearly, they were loaded. They had a lot of money and they used it, and then they left it. So now if we go back to this narrative, and my father dwelt in a tent, it's laying out a specific contrast. They had a nice home. They probably lived on a large plot of land. They had tons of money. They were well educated. And now they're in the wilderness in a tent. Why is that contrast important? Well, Nephi, in the very next verse, after the shortest verse, gives a commentary about himself, what he did in response to this contrast, as opposed to what his brothers did. His brothers complained, they murmured. Let's see what Nephi did. In verse 16, he says, "And it came to pass that I, Nephi, being exceedingly young, nevertheless being large in stature, and also having great desires to know of the mysteries of God, wherefore I did cry unto the Lord, and behold, he did visit me, and did soften my heart that I did believe all the words which had been spoken by my father. Wherefore I did not rebel against him like unto my brothers." Nephi is teaching us the cost of discipleship. He's pointing out, hey, there's this big contrast. We were very well off. The Lord asked us to leave, and now we hardly have anything, and we're living in a tent in the wilderness, in the middle of nowhere. This is hard. Nephi acknowledged it was hard. In fact, he was feeling some of probably the same feelings that his brothers felt. So what did he do? He said, I'm going to reach out to the Lord. I'm going to soften my heart. I want answers. I want to follow you. And so he did. That's the answer that we need to get from the shortest verse in the Book of Mormon, is the cost of discipleship. My father dwelt in a tent. It's a contrast. Sometimes we have to leave the worldly things to follow God. We see a similar story in the Bible. Jesus is approached by a young ruler who's asking him, what do I do to inherit the kingdom of God? Jesus simply answers, well, keep the commandments. And the young ruler says, all this that I've done all this, from my youth, in fact. What more do I need? And Jesus says a very important phrase. Then Jesus, beholding him, loved him, and said unto him, one thing thou lackest. Go thy way, sell whatsoever thou hast, and give to the poor, and thou shalt have treasure in heaven. And come, take up the cross, and follow me. And he was sad at that saying, and he went away grieved, for he had great possessions. We can decide how we will respond to God's call to action when it comes. Are we going to be like Laman and Lemuel, who complain and moan and turn away from God? Or are we going to be like Nephi? Humble ourselves, seek God, and submit to his will, even if it means we have to give up all things. If you liked this video and would like me to do another video on the second shortest verse in the Book of Mormon, hit like on this. If I get 100 likes, we'll make another video on the second shortest verse in the Book of Mormon. Also, if this video was helpful, here's another video that you can watch on what is the role of a prophet in the Bible.